The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, released a paper stating that Bitcoin is widely used in the world for cross-border transactions, also making a statement that Bitcoin is a strong long-term savings vehicle, shocking everybody, really putting down the endorsement for Bitcoin. What is this foretelling? What does this mean? Let's dive into it. Welcome back to the Blockhash podcast channel. Make sure to check out our membership options if you want to get exclusive content and access before everybody else and support the podcast. Make sure to check out those options on the YouTube channel for a cup of coffee a month, guys. Also, check out our sponsor, Bump Social. They are revolutionizing the game when it comes to social media for users, creators, advertisers, and brands alike, creating opportunities to connect with more people, communities, followings, and engage and play fun games and win prizes and do all kinds of cool things. Make sure to check them out on iOS and Android. All links in the description down below. All right, let's dive into this. I'll go through it top to bottom as always, and my thoughts will be at the very end, my synopsis. So Bitcoin is powering at least one aspect of global commerce, capital flows, with it accounting for a significant part of some countries' GDP, according to a paper by the International Monetary Fund. The use of Bitcoin for cross-border transactions is geographically very widespread, with very relatively high intensities across regions, both for off-chain and for on-chain flows. The magnitudes of the estimated Bitcoin cross-border flows are sizable with respect to several countries' GDP, especially in those which experience smaller capital flows. This is the first serious study as far as we are aware on Bitcoin's use in global commerce, in this case, capital flows. This paper shows that countries that have limited access to the broader global economy are bigger users of Bitcoin on a relative basis, says Matt Hogan, the CIO at Bitwise. It makes sense. People in countries facing either capital controls or limited access to the global economy are using Bitcoin as a release valve, a way around. The findings also suggest that Bitcoin is more useful in countries with less advanced capital markets and financial systems. The US has the most extreme reading in its dominance by traditional funds compared to Bitcoin, says Hogan. On the other end of the spectrum are countries like Venezuela and Ukraine that can give a distorted view on crypto usefulness to Americans or Europeans that are not facing financial crisis, unlike hyperinflating Venezuela or war-torn Ukraine. Yet the map shared on the paper comparing Bitcoin's capital flows as percentage of GDP shown above suggests its usefulness goes beyond extremes. The Netherlands, for example, and Switzerland are both green, as it's UK to some extent, or Portugal. Then there's Nigeria, where they're blaming Bitcoin for the fall in Naira due to its being traded against the US dollar. The USD aspect could potentially explain to some extent the less green in America and the more green elsewhere. But that could also just be an indication of the limitations of trying to identify Bitcoin transfers. Nonetheless, that Bitcoin is actually being used for reasons other than price speculation and has become clear in our years of reporting. Trying to put some numbers on it is useful in understanding how it is being used, with the IMF finding that the light increase in Bitcoin usage is a symptom of imbalances in the traditional economy. Now, that suggests crypto's at efficiency, and thus can potentially boost economic productivity by removing frictions in global commerce. This is very fascinating that the IMF put out a paper on this. I'm definitely going to read this in a bit more detail and dive into it. But essentially what they're trying to say is, in a lot of emerging economies where they don't have access to traditional banking rails and payment systems, or there's sanctions, or there's war, or there's instability in their economy, or even in their society, Bitcoin has served as a very solid bridge for those people. You look on the map here and you can see that, obviously some of the biggest development and growth for crypto and Bitcoin, will happen in a development form in first world countries like Europe and the US and Asia. But in terms of its most practical use cases, if you look at the bright green spots like Southeast Asia, you'll look in broadly into Latin America, you look in parts of Africa, Eastern, Northeast, Southwest, Eastern Europe, or the Middle East, even in parts of Russia, you're starting to see where those places really need a solution, and Bitcoin's fulfilling it very strongly. And that's a good sign. We want to see that. That's, the benefit of Bitcoin is being able to bypass systems when systems don't work for us, or when they're too harsh, or when they actually suppress us or oppress us. So Bitcoin allows us a route to get beyond that. It allows us a way to connect with other people in the world and to transmit value, to earn money, to monetize, to live your life, to not have that impairment that exists. And then once you start denominating it, like places like El Salvador, for example, then it's even easier, because you don't need to worry about currency conversion. You don't have to go to your local fiat currency or convert to a different asset in order to spend it or use it. You can just, spend it directly. And that's the ultimate benefit that I think is the next step. And this progression is saying, okay, well, screw the dollar, screw the euro, screw the yuan, screw the peso. We're just going to accept, spend, transact, pay in Bitcoin. When that happens and people start to accept it, not only is Bitcoin's price going to continue to fly in value, but its practicality is just going to jump and like I'll take a quantum leap upwards. That's just something that we're waiting on. Like, you don't have enough vendors accepting it. You don't have enough coffee shops accepting it. Your auto detailer doesn't accept it, or your car wash, or a restaurant, or where you go to buy the latest fashion items, like, or even e-commerce. Like, there's not enough places where we should practically be seeing Bitcoin accepted these days, or just cryptocurrency in general, but we'll get there. We're getting to that point where Bitcoin is in such high demand that is going to become much more commonplace, to the point where I think everything will have Bitcoin as a second denomination to pay for something at any given point in time, for just about every business, maybe 70, 80% of businesses going into the next 10 years, especially in first world countries, maybe even higher in emerging economies. So it's very fascinating. I'm glad the IMF is looking at this seriously, and that they actually see the widespread use case and effect of it. And I do remember seeing an article where they were quoted mentioning Bitcoin as a really good long-term savings vehicle, now admitting that over the long term, Bitcoin has shown that, yes, it's volatile and it's cyclical, but that cyclicalness actually, reinforces its tokenomic structure. The fact that every 4 years, more or less every 4 years, that it cuts in half its inflation rate, the amount of Bitcoin that come into existence. It's, constantly being bought up by people and added, whether it's an individual retail investor, or a small business, or one of the largest asset managers in the world, or a local government. People are buying it and holding it and hedging against other assets and currencies with Bitcoin, adding additional value to it, given the fact there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. So, you make that supply more and more scarce, and you show that it's incredibly valuable. And now you add application to it in use cases, and then all of a sudden you just get explosion in price. And that's what's happened with Bitcoin, and what will continue to happen with Bitcoin. So it's cool to see the IMF, jump on top of this and actually show some recognition for it, whether they like it or not, and to acknowledge it for what it is, a payment system that's very solid and robust, and an asset that holds and increases in value over time, a good savings vehicle. So it's great to see that. I wanted to share that today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section about the IMF's comments, and if those are, relatively positive or negative, or, what their intention might be. They haven't been friendly to countries that support Bitcoin quite as much, but they seem to be coming around to the idea that it's here to stay. That's good enough for me. So let me know what you guys think. Also, give me a like if you don't mind. Really do appreciate it. And a subscribe, so I can keep sharing out great content to you on our road to monetization here. We're getting very close. If you already are subscribed, or you're a member, or you're supporting the channel, really do appreciate you guys. I'll keep cranking out some cool, fun, and awesome content as we go. So talk to you guys on the next video. Cheers.